Good evening. I am so pleased to welcome you all to this very special evening tonight. My name is Abigail Beeman, and I'm so pleased to be your MC. I'm a reporter with Global National based here in our Ottawa bureau, and I'm very lucky to have this real backdrop of the Peace Tower behind me, not virtual there. I also have the honor to serve as a director with CHESS, the Center for Holocaust Education and Scholarship. Welcome to our launch event for Holocaust Education Month, All in the Telling, featuring Saul Rubinek. As is our tradition at CHESS, we hold this opening event on the anniversary of Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass. On this night in 1938, Nazis in Germany torched synagogues and vandalized thousands of Jewish homes, schools, and businesses. Close to 100 Jews were killed. 30,000 Jewish men were arrested and sent to concentration camps. Kristallnacht marked a turning point. Conditions for Jews in Germany and elsewhere in Europe got worse, restrictions more severe. Nazis and collaborators soon began to carry out the systemic murder of 6 million Jews. Today, November 9th, marks the 83rd anniversary of that dark event. It also marks something else brighter, the 6th anniversary of CHESS, born out of the need for fulsome Holocaust education here in Ottawa and launched in the face of rising anti-Semitism and hate. We are so grateful to have a number of sponsors and partners who made this special evening possible. A very deep thank you to all of those whose names you see on your screen right now. Before I turn to our chair, Mina, I have a few points of housekeeping to go over. Please note, first of all, you've all been muted to ensure sound quality, and your videos have all been turned off, except of course for our speakers. To ensure optimum viewing, we recommend that you close any browser windows or apps on your devices, except this Zoom, of course. Tonight, we'll be playing a few videos, and depending on your internet connection, if a few members of your house are watching together, you may all want to use one device to have the best viewing experience. We are very lucky to have a chance to ask Mr. Rubinek some questions tonight after his presentation. If you'd like to ask a question, use the Q&A function that you'll find at the bottom of your screen in the black control strip. We are aiming to have a more personal feel for this question and answer, and Mr. Rubinek would like to see you face to face to ask your question. So if your question is picked, you'll see a message on your screen that you have been reconnected as a panelist. That allows you to then turn on your camera and your microphone, and we'd ask you to do that so that you can ask Mr. Rubinek your question directly and he can see you. But if you prefer to keep your camera and microphone off, just select the anonymous checkbox when you submit your question, and I will ask your question directly. If you experience any technical difficulties with all that, just let tech support know via the chat box, also located in the black control strip at the bottom of your screen. And if you are wondering, a recording of tonight's session will be available in the coming weeks on the CHESS website. One last and very important point, Giving Tuesday is coming up November 30th. Please consider making a difference, support the fight against anti-Semitism, and help keep the memory of the Holocaust alive. CHESS is asking for your support to ensure future generations remember the Holocaust. This year, if you donate on Giving Tuesday, we are very pleased to share that the first $20,000 in donations will be matched by an anonymous donor. So that means that you could see your support doubled. Thank you for sticking with me through all that housekeeping. I'm now very pleased to give you CHESS's chair, Mina Cohen.
Thank you, Abigail. Good evening and welcome to Holocaust Education Month launch event in commemoration of Kristallnacht, All in the Telling with actor Saul Rubinek. I want to extend a warm welcome to the survivors and their families who joined us tonight, to Honorable Professor Irvin Kotler, to Jim Watson, the Mayor of Ottawa, to Dr. Gary Pulvermacher, the Honorary Chair of our event, to our event sponsors, and to our friend Bernie Farber. And a special welcome to Saul Rubinek, our esteemed keynote speaker. Welcome, everyone. The inauguration of CHESS in 2015 was a symbolic affirmation of CHESS' commitment to continue transmitting the lessons and legacies of the Holocaust. Since it was established 6 years ago tonight, CHESS has experienced remarkable growth, reaching out to thousands within the Ottawa area and beyond. CHESS programs throughout the year are offered in cooperation of embassies, institutions in Ottawa, and organizations across the country and overseas, and include the annual Holocaust Education Month program in November with events for descendants of survivors, outreach to schools with an annual teachers workshop, a speakers bureau, and more. This year, I'm very pleased to share that we launched a new chapter in the life of chess. Since January 2021, chess has been operating independently as a registered charity dedicated to addressing the pressing challenges presented by growing anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial, and distortion. Our themes and our focus on education and our programs have not changed. To the contrary, they have strengthened. We have welcomed new members and new partners who bring a wealth of experience to chess, and we launched a very successful fundraising campaign. I want to thank every one of you for your generous support. With your support, chess will continue to spread its wings and soar even higher. Our strength continues to lie in our dedicated team of volunteers, our committee, and the community support for our work. The Holocaust provides us with the most effective subject for examining moral issues, and we believe that the more and better Holocaust education is the best response to the rise of anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial and distortion. We strive to create better tools and strategies for educators across the province so they can teach and explore the lessons of the Holocaust. Our plans for 2022 include developing such new tools through unique educational projects that include a virtual memorial for Holocaust survivors and their descendants, which will be a lasting tribute and a much needed research resource. Last chance testimony of the Shoah Foundation, which will seek survivors' testimony which were not recorded yet. And together with our partners, a project to enhance the educational experience of visitors to the National Holocaust Monument in Ottawa in the form of an eye walk. History teaches us that we must stand up against all manifestations of hatred. It is our responsibility as Jews to confront any and all displays of hatred through education and activism. And tonight, we eagerly anticipate a unique experience of education, memory, and remembrance through the art of performance with acclaimed actor Saul Rubinek. I'm now pleased to share with you an important message from our Prime Minister, Honorable Justin Trudeau, and welcome our dear friend, Honorable Professor Kotler. The Honorable Irwin Kotler is the founder and chair of Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, Canada's special envoy on preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism, member of high-level panel of legal experts on media freedom, emeritus professor of law at McGill University, international human rights lawyer, and counsel to prisoners of conscience. He is a former Minister of Justice, Attorney General of Canada, and longtime Member of Parliament. We are going to hear from Professor Kotler immediately after the message from the Prime Minister. Thank you.
Hello everyone, bonjour à tous. First, let me thank the Center for Holocaust Education and Scholarship for the important work they do to continue to teach and preserve the stories of the Holocaust. And thank you to everyone for joining us as we launch this important month of education, learning, and reflection. Le mois de la sensibilisation à l'Holocauste n'est pas seulement l'occasion de réfléchir au chemin que nous avons parcouru, mais aussi à celui qu'il nous reste à parcourir. Parce que la montée des crimes motivés par la haine visant les communautés juives est alarmante et totalement inacceptable. C'est un point que j'ai soulevé il y a quelques mois lors du sommet national sur l'antisémitisme et que je continuerai, ainsi que notre gouvernement, à faire valoir jusqu'à ce que tout le monde au Canada se sente à l'abri de la haine ou de la discrimination. Together, we will continue to fight and reject anti-Semitism in all of its forms. To paraphrase my friend, the late Rabbi Bulka, we can go from the darkest chapter in human history to creating the prospect for a brighter tomorrow. And that journey begins with education and remembrance, which is our most powerful tool against the ignorance and cruelty that fueled the Holocaust. Canada and all Canadians must stand up against anti-Semitic attitudes that still exist in our communities. And we must continue to come together and act on the tragic history of the Holocaust so we can build a better future for everyone. Nous restons inébranlables dans notre engagement à marcher aux côtés de la communauté juive ici et partout dans le monde entier pour lutter contre l'antisémitisme. We continue to pledge, now and forever, never again. Merci.
I'm delighted to participate in this launch of Holocaust Education Month, organized by CHEST under its inspirational chair, Mina Cohn. And this is its 6th anniversary, and I've had the pleasure and privilege to participate in many of evenings that she and her exemplary group have organized. And tonight, featuring Saul Rubinek, and where we come together to engage and learn and listen and reflect, to bear witness and to act upon the universal lessons of remembrance and reminder, as the Prime Minister has just conveyed to us. Today, as Abigail mentioned, we mark the 83rd anniversary of Kristallnacht, literally translated as the Night of Crystals. I've always thought that this was a misleading and sanitizing metaphor, for this really was a night of terrorizing pogroms and was the precursor to the mass murder of 6 million Jews. Kristallnacht was not just a night of broken glass. It was a mass pogrom in which over 1,000 synagogues were torched, in which thousands of shops and schools and homes were destroyed, in which over 100 Jews were murdered, and where 30,000 Jews were subject to a mass arrest, rounded up, and then deported to concentration camps. And at the end of all this, the Jews themselves were asked to pay for the damages of having been assaulted. It is often said that the Holocaust would not have happened without 3 participants: the perpetrators, the collaborators, and the bystanders. But there was a 4th, la trahison des clercs, the betrayal of the elites, the doctors and scientists, the lawyers and judges, the church leaders and the journalists, the architects and the engineers. They did not torch the synagogues or burn the books or smash the windows or destroy the schools and the shops, nor did they themselves engage in the roundup of the Jews. But they gave the orders, as Heydrich did. They incited to hatred, as Goebbels did. They orchestrated the mass pogroms. And as the Supreme Court of Canada put it, the Holocaust did not begin in the gas chambers. It began with words. These, as the court put it, are the catastrophic effects of racism. These, as the court put it, are the chilling facts of history. Nor did Kristallnacht itself happen all of a sudden. It was a continuation and culmination of the oldest and most enduring and most toxic of hatreds, anti-Semitism, a hatred that is toxic to democracies as it was for Germany in the 30s. It is not often remembered or even known that the infamous concentration camp Dachau was established in 1933, that the Nuremberg race laws disenfranchising the Jews were adopted in 1935, that the boycott of Jews, the Aryanization of Jewish property, the Jew hatred, all proceeded and made Kristallnacht possible in 1938. Yes, the Nazi leaders gave the orders, and the pogroms were carried out by Nazi stormtroopers, by the SS, by the Gestapo, and their collaborators. But the bystanders were complicit in their silence, in their inaction, in their indifference. The bystanders did not torch the synagogues. They did not burn the books. They did not smash the windows. They did not destroy the schools and the shops. They did not round up the Jews, but they stood by and they watched while synagogues, schools, shops, and the homes of their neighbors, their classmates, their colleagues, their friends were destroyed. And they were bystanders because from 1933 to 1938, they were programmed to see the Jews as alien. They were programmed to see the Jews as deserving of their fate, of the Jews as the enemy of all that was good and the embodiment of all that was evil. And so the slogan at the time, Jews do not belong on our porches, on our benches. Jews do not belong in our swimming pools. Jews do not belong in our professions. No Jews anywhere. Let there be no mistake about it. Anti-Semitism is the canary in the mineshaft of evil. It is toxic to democracies and can be toxic to our own democracy. We cannot allow ourselves to be bystanders. We must speak up, we must stand up, and we must act. That is the universal lesson of Kristallnacht. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Kotler, for your extremely powerful words. We're just so lucky and fortunate to have you join us this evening. Next, I have a message to share from the Israeli Embassy, and it reads as follows. The Embassy of Israel in Canada is proud and honored to collaborate with Chess in this important evening commemorating Kristallnacht and officially opening Holocaust Education Month. With anti-Semitism and Holocaust distortion on the rise around the world, and with fewer survivors and witnesses with us to share their firsthand experiences, it is our responsibility to make sure their stories are told and that lessons are learned. This evening, All in the Telling plans to do just that, sharing the story of one family affected across time by the horrors of the Holocaust so that we all never forget. The Embassy of Israel in Canada is proud to support tonight's event. Next, we are very pleased to be joined this evening by Ottawa's Mayor, Jim Watson, who I will now invite to share a few words. Mayor Watson.
Well, thank you very much, Abigail. Merci beaucoup, Abigail, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Bonsoir, mesdames et messieurs. On behalf of the City of Ottawa and my colleagues on City Council, I'm honored to join you this evening as part of November's Holocaust Education Month and in commemoration of Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht, as we know, happened 83 years ago on the night of November 9th, 1938, when violent anti-Jewish demonstrations that broke out across Germany, Austria, and parts of Czechoslovakia. I want to thank the Center for Holocaust Education Scholarship for inviting me today, and in particular Barb Farber. Thank you for letting me know about this important seminar and for the work that you do to promote the knowledge and understanding of the history and legacy of the Holocaust. The Center is working to ensure the continuity of Holocaust education through the active involvement of Holocaust survivors and their descendants. This evening features a presentation by acclaimed Canadian actor Saul Rubinek, and I want to thank him very much for being part of this special event and to speak about his experiences and the story of his parents' survival during the Holocaust in Poland. And I heard a great interview that Saul did on CBC, I believe, just yesterday. As we remember the attacks against the Jewish population in Germany and beyond, and the ensuing horrors, we commemorate the victims of the Holocaust and pay tribute to the survivors who rebuilt their lives in Canada and elsewhere. Even after 80 years, we're still seeing heinous acts of anti-Semitism and degradation of the victims of the Holocaust when we hear people compare public health interventions like mask and vaccine mandates to that of the actions of the Nazis. And on the weekend in Ottawa, a swastika was painted on a building in our downtown core. We can't let the horrors of the Holocaust fade, nor can we forget the dangers of anti-Semitism, indifference, and silence. We recognize what this means to Ottawa's Jewish community and Jewish communities across Canada and around the world. And we remember the millions of Jews murdered by the Nazis and promise never again. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Mayor, for your words. It's now my pleasure to introduce our honorary chair for this evening. That's Dr. Jerry Pulvermacher. Dr. Jerry Pulvermacher is a licensed industrial psychologist. While Maclean's magazine once dubbed him one of Canada's management gurus, he has had the privilege of working with many colleagues and clients globally. When asked what he was most proud of, his answer was quick and unwavering: his family. His family in Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto, LA, and throughout Israel, where he and Mary Bell, his wife of 52 years, will be spending the month of January. When asked what makes for a successful 50-year career, his answer was passion, caring, and hard work. When asked what makes for a successful family, he answered passion, love, and really hard work. He also added that in career and family, the role of luck cannot be underestimated. I give you Dr. Pulvermacher.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I'm delighted to be here and to share this event with our dignitaries and our guest of honor this evening, Saul Rubinek. Saul and I share at least two important attributes. We both have a fondness for Ottawa, and we are both children of Holocaust survivors. I was grateful to accept the role of honorary chair of this special Holocaust Week event for a number of reasons. First, I wanted to honor my parents, both survivors of the Holocaust, and also to honor my countless relatives that did not survive, the family I never knew. Second, I was born and spent the first 2 years of my life in the infamous concentration and displaced persons camp, Bergen-Belsen. I subsequently grew up in Montreal, surrounded by tens of Holocaust survivors. This experience never leaves you and influences all aspects of your life, as I'm sure Saul and many others attending this event can attest to. But most crucially, I accepted the honor because I'm completely committed to the concept of never again. I wholeheartedly believe that to build a society of tolerance and specifically to fight anti-Semitism, the primary route is through education. And education is precisely the vital work that Chess is doing, particularly educating our young people, their teachers, and the boards of directors which lead our schools. We all well know that discrimination still exists in our schools, whether universities or high schools. We have an obligation to help make this world a more tolerant one for all. And given our history over centuries, a more tolerant place, especially for Jews. In my view, Jews need to be at the forefront, visibly fighting against discrimination and educating our next generation of the risks of becoming complacent. I take my hat off to Mina and Cohen and Chess. She and her committee do tremendous work day in and day out. And this work must never lose its relevance because we need to ensure never again. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest of honor, Mr. Saul Rubinek. Saul was born in Fürstenwald displaced persons camp outside of Munich, Germany, the son of Frania and Israel Rubinek, Holocaust survivors from Poland. His father was a Yiddish theater actor in Poland before the war. After the war, in the DP camp, Israel formed a Yiddish repertory company where he was both a director and actor. The family's journey to freedom was documented in a book written by Saul and in the 1987 documentary film produced by him about his parents' reunion with the farmers who saved their lives, both titled So Many Miracles. Saul's professional acting career started when he was 7 years old at the Ottawa Little Theatre and spans more than 50 years and hundreds of roles on stage, radio, film, and television. Saul is also a filmmaker and playwright. His new play, All in the Telling, is about the circumstances that led to his writing the book and producing the documentary film about his parents and how these events affected three generations of his family. He hopes to premiere the play in Ottawa at the National Arts Centre and then tour it worldwide. It gives me great pleasure to welcome and introduce Saul Rubinek to you. Saul.
Thank you, Jerry. It's very kind of you. Thank you. Nice introduction. Hello, everyone. It's the first time I'm speaking to so many people this way. I'm a child of Holocaust survivors. I'm an actor. I'm a writer. Grew up in Ottawa. So I guess in a way it all kind of comes together for this event to mean something extraordinary to me. I'm very grateful to the Center for Holocaust Education and Scholarship for giving me this opportunity, to inviting me to share my thoughts with you. In a minute, I'm gonna perform some scenes from this new play I've written that you've heard about. But here's the thing: my play is not actually got anything directly to do with Kristallnacht. I mean, you'd think it should, right? I mean, I'm going to be performing excerpts from it, so it should have something to do with it. I'm not an historian. I'm not a journalist. I'm a storyteller. So in a way, the story of my play has everything to do with Kristallnacht, a night that did not end on November the 9th, 1938. That night of broken glass from windows of Jewish stores and homes and synagogues and hearts. That night, the sound of shattered glass, it echoed all over Germany, and then all over Europe. If we listen, if we want to listen, we can hear glass shattering every day, all over the world, breaking windows, every race, every country, every culture, right now. I was born in one of the largest refugee camps in all of Europe, 5,000 people. Today, refugee camps have 500,000 people. Shattered glass every day. And every day, people picking up the broken pieces, trying to put them back together. I'm a storyteller. Historians and journalists know how to tell stories about millions of people. I don't. My story is about just a few people, my family, about the glass shattered in our lives and how we tried to pick up the pieces. My mother used to say that we are alive after this Holocaust is a miracle. And so many miracles. And so many miracles. That's why I called the book I wrote about my parents, So Many Miracles. And 35 years ago, I went with my mom and dad back to Poland to film a documentary about their reunion with the Polish Catholic farmers that hid them from the Nazis for 2.5 years. And I called that film also, I called that So Many Miracles. That was my mother's attitude towards survival. So many miracles. About my father, about survival, he had a slightly different attitude. He used to say, I believe in God, but I'll take him to court. If my mother and father's attitude seems contradictory to life, well, what can I tell you? You just got a glimpse of my play. I call the play All in the Telling. Throughout the play, we see clips from the documentary I just told you about, made in Poland, about my parents. And in the play, the clips are being shown to a Polish government censorship committee. This really happened in 1988. Their job is to decide whether or not to approve the film for broadcast in the Polish People's Republic. The first clip that the committee sees, my mother and father talk about the town where they met, fell in love, the town of Pinchev, where my mother was born and raised. Clip number 1, please.
My father told me that in 1939, in the town of Pinchev, there were 10,000 people. 50% Polish, 50% Jewish. He used to say they didn't exactly live in harmony, but he said,
they get along. Somehow they got along. Anti-Semitism was there before the war even, but they came along.
The center of the city was a square. In the middle was a garden, and all around were houses and stores. And we had our house there, my parents, right there in the square of that city.
my mother told me that when the Germans took Pinchev in 1939, a German soldier was killed in the church by a sniper. To retaliate, the Germans burned the whole square, which was mostly Jewish homes and stores. My mother's house was burning along with the others. Everyone was forced out, all the Jews on the square, and the Germans chased them all to the church.
They were chasing us here. My whole family, they were chasing us right here to the church. We heard shots and we saw blood on the road. In the minute I came here with my family, we saw here machine guns. We saw one here, every 3 meters, another one. And then on the other side, another one. And so many people were here. And I said to my father said, that's it. Now they're going to shoot us all. We're all going to be shot. So my father said, let's run to the wall. Let's be the first one at the wall. And we ran. We ran fast here to that wall. We came to the wall here at this door. And I was standing here with my brother and my 2 sisters all together, my parents, and were standing right here. And here people, they're chasing more people here, more people. And then the Germans came. And when they stood at these machine guns. So we went right to the floor, and in a second, there was a mountains of people here, and they were shooting and shooting and screaming. The screams, I could still hear the screams. And then after a half an hour, they stopped. And when they stopped, and it was quiet, I got up slowly and I said, my gosh, we are all alive? This was a miracle. So many bodies here and we're still alive here. This is a miracle, still alive. We're still alive.
The sound of shattered glass starting to echo all across Poland. Now, you would think the Polish committee would have no problem about approving this documentary for broadcast, right? After all, it's a film mostly about how ordinary Polish people did an extraordinary thing. They risked their lives to save Jewish people. But back in the late 80s, the Polish censor board was worried. Well, the Polish People's Republic communist regime was about to fall. They were worried about their jobs, of course. But I mean, they were worried about this film, about what my family might say about being back in Poland. Why? In the play, there's a scene that happens about 2 weeks after we filmed my mother at that church. My parents receive a gift from the local Polish governor, a beautifully illustrated hardcover book about the history of the town of Pinchev. And my father tells me, I read it, all of it. I am sure the governor didn't read it, or he would not have given it to me as a gift. Okay, my father tells me why. He tells me that since the 15th century, half the population here at Pinchev were Jews until the Nazis began roundups for extermination. In this book, he says, there are only 2 references to the Jews of Pinchev. He translates one paragraph from Polish about an onion-smelling, unhealthy segment of the population, Jews, who lived secretively and apart, often cheated local Christians, and caused the spread of disease in the community. And that's it. He says, that's everything about the 400 years of Jews in this history book of Pinchev, except for one more sentence that he translates. In autumn 1942, he reads, all Jews in Pinchev disappeared for unknown reasons. The book was returned to the governor's office with both those passages marked as the reason it was an unacceptable gift. Now, I managed to convince my father to let me have the book returned by our government translator and not do what my father wanted to do, which was to hand the book back to the governor personally. If you knew my father, you'd understand I was avoiding an international incident that could have put relations between Canada and Poland in jeopardy. That book was published 1 year before we filmed the documentary, in 1985. 47 years after Kristallnacht in Berlin, you could still hear the sound of broken glass in 1985 in Poland. And you can still hear it today in Poland, where if you write about Polish collaboration with the Nazis during the Holocaust, you're breaking the law. And you can hear glass breaking today in Hungary too, where history is actively being revised to suit the people in power. And you can hear glass shattered today all across America too, where everyday lies are promoted as alternative facts by politicians who fundraise on them, campaign with them, and get elected by people who believe them. This is a scene from the play. It takes place 44 years ago. I'm talking to my father and my mother. Well, I'm not really talking to them. I'm trying to interview them. I'm going to explain. My parents and me sometimes had a difficult relationship. In fact, right before the scene, my father and I weren't speaking. I was in love with a non-Jewish woman. Let's just say there was a lot of drama. My mother would speak to me, but whenever I called, she'd mostly cry. This has been going on for months. I was racking my brain. How do we get past this? So after thinking very, very carefully about it, I knew exactly what to do. I lied. I told them I needed to interview them for a book about their lives in Poland. Penguin was going to publish it. Okay, well, to help the career of their only son, my father would talk to me. My mother would try to stop crying long enough to let me ask my questions. But there really was no book. I invented it. I invented everything. I invented the book, the publisher, the reason for the interviews. I did it so that we would have a reason to talk together, to be together, to maybe we could all figure out how to live with each other. This scene in the play is me and my mom and dad. It's 1977. We're in their kitchen in Ottawa. Between us is a little cassette tape recorder. My father, first of all, we're not going to talk about you know what. Well, maybe Dad, that's exactly what we should be. No, the publisher does not need to know about that. My mother, you know what? Let's not get excited. We'll have a glass of tea. We won't talk about your life. We'll talk about our life like your publisher wants. Yeah, Penguin is paying you to publish. They could afford to give you a better tape recorder. All right, what do you want to know? Okay, let's start. Wait a minute, my mother. Wait a minute. What? Look how you're dressed. What's the matter with you? You're dressed like a bum. You're on television now. People are going to recognize you. Mom, it's fine, mother. Don't worry about it. No, your mother was absolutely right. An artist in public, he has to be dressed. I'm not in public. I'm in your kitchen. Listen, when I was an actor in Poland, we went out anywhere. We were always dressed tip top. You come to the store. We got some new stock. We got beautiful suits. You could pick out whatever you want. Could we not talk about me, please? How about if we talk about you? How about tell me what it was like to be an actor in Poland or something? I'll tell you this. I didn't dare tell my father about it. When I was 16 years old, I started playing Yiddish theater. I didn't tell him. He was a Talmudic scholar, your grandfather. He was a great man. I wanted him to be proud of me. You hear what I'm telling you? Yeah. Your father, he never found out about your acting? Oh, he knew. He just never said anything. for a whole year, until one night he was waiting up for me, 2 o'clock in the morning. And he said, "You have 8 brothers and sisters, and you are the oldest. Don't you know that they all look up to you? That they want to be like you? That you have to set an example for them? Listen, I know what you are doing. I didn't say a word, but tonight you left the table in the middle of a Shabbos dinner. How could I raise a son like this? Explain it to me. How can you go so far away from God?" You know, I didn't answer your grandfather right away. He had 2 eyes, like an eagle. They could see right through you. And I said, Tate, the play tonight, it was written by a Yiddish writer, Shalom Aleichem. Happens in a shtetl, about the marriage troubles between a husband and wife. Jewish family, about troubles with their children. I'm one of the children, about how they're making a living, about their lives. The audience, they laugh, they cry. I think many people believe that anything wrong or good only happens to them, to nobody else. But theater, Father, if it's good, it shows people they're not alone. Your grandfather, he stood there and he thought about it, and then he said, maybe it's not so far away from God after all. Did your father ever see you in a play? Right before the Nazis, 1939. Twice he came. First play was a drama, the second time it was a comedy. He liked the comedy better. So, my mother, we're not going to sit here all day. I have things to do. Ask your questions. I have to tell you, Shlomo, I don't understand why someone wants to make a book about this, about hiding from the Nazis. So everybody already knows from the Diary of Anne Frank. Who needs another one? All right, if you need it, all right, we'll do it. Well, I thought you'd be okay with me asking these. I thought you'd be okay. Tell me stories. I've heard them all my life. I just have questions now that I never asked before. I'm sorry if some of the questions will be difficult. Well, that's why Penguin is paying you, right? To get answers to difficult questions. Yeah, in a way. So I ask, what was it like? What was it like to be hunted? You're both in hiding for how many months? My mother, 28 months. Things happened in such a way we were meant to survive. Not because we were special or God looked down on us, or it's not that you're smarter or better. It's for reasons that you could never imagine. It was just luck, whoever survived. It was just meant to be, that's all. They always said they were lucky, because through it all, they had each other. In 1941, during the German occupation of Pinchev, my mom and dad got married. They were 21 years old. To make a living, they opened a tiny little store. They became very popular with farmers. My mother baked cookies, served vodka, and if they didn't have what the farmers needed, she told funny stories to keep them busy when my father used to run out the back to a wholesaler to get them whatever they wanted. Being friendly with the farmers in that little store, that probably saved their lives. One year after they were married, on October 1st, 1942, the Nazis rounded up the Jews in Pinchev for deportation to extermination camp. My mother was 7 months pregnant. In this scene from the play, one of the interviews for my so-called book, my mom and dad tell me what happened the day of the roundups. My dad, bad news, travels fast. People escaped from the concentration camps and they ran from town to town. Wir brennen Jeden! They're burning Jews! They're gonna kill us all! And people thought that's impossible. They must be crazy. Most didn't want to believe. But I believed. The whole summer of 1942, I was digging, making a bunker The way he made that bunker, your father, it was a masterpiece. At the bottom of the stairs, in the basement in the family house, he covered it with pieces of wood. On top of that, he put cement and clay. You couldn't tell it was there. We were sitting upstairs at the table, the first night of Rosh Hashanah. Me, your mother, her family. And right in the middle, we hear, Raus! Raus! Raus, alle Juden, raus! Raus! We looked through the window. We saw the Germans were gathering all the Jewish people from out of town and in town together. My mom. We ran straight down to the bunker, all of us, right from the table. The Poles were screaming on the square, where are the Greenfelds? Where are the Greenfelds? Our family name was Greenfeld. My grandfather owned the flour mill. Who didn't know us in Pinchuk? You could hear them right outside. Where are the Greenfelds? So they came looking for us, the Germans. They ran down the stairs, right on top of us. They were standing. That bunker, it wasn't big, but it was deep, so we could stand up, not move. We were afraid to breathe. Later, 2 hours later, I wanted to see what's happening outside, so I sneaked up and through a hole in the stones. I saw hundreds and hundreds of Jews in the square standing like mummies, just stunned, surrounded with German soldiers on horses, hitting everybody. And suddenly I saw my own grandfather. I didn't know what to do. I ran back to the bunker. They started asking me questions. What did you see? What did you see? I couldn't bring out a single word. In that hole, my mother, in that hole, I was standing for what? 7 months pregnant? What do I have to look forward to? After 8 hours, it was quiet. We came out, square was empty. We thought the best thing now is to run to another town. Imagine for me, in the middle of the night, 7 months pregnant, to run through the woods 20 kilometers. Well, what could I do? I'm not gonna die here. But after a month, they ran out of places to run. My mother was now 8 months pregnant. Clip number 2, please.
Her father came to me and he said, listen, I want to talk to you something and listen to me carefully. We are not sure that everybody's gonna get killed. And I'm sure you can be alive. Run away with your friends to Russia. Right away I said, no, I'm not gonna do it. I'm in love, I love my wife, and I'm not gonna save my life by myself. After a while, if I'm gonna live, and no, I cannot do that. And I'm not doing it, and don't ask me anymore, and I don't wanna talk about it. And that would stop the talking.
And then later my father came to me and he said, Franja, listen, my daughter, you know how much I love you. I spoke already to Israel and I told him to run away. You know that he could save his life. You cannot run anymore. Tell him. If you're gonna tell him, he's gonna listen to you. Because he loves you so much, he's gonna listen to you. And why should you both die if one could survive? Why? So I saw that my father is right, it talks sense. So I said, okay, I'm gonna talk to him. When I went and talked to him and I said, Israel, you could save your life, father is right. You go out, you're gonna both get killed, save your life, at least one will be left over. He said, what? You just tell me one thing. Would you do it if it would be the opposite? So I said to him, I don't know how to say I would do it. I cannot run. He said, but just tell me, would you do it if you can? Well, I didn't answer. What could I answer? He said, that's all. I don't want to talk about it. And it's not fair you even asking me to do such a thing. And he walked away and that's it.
And then my parents heard a rumor that back in Pinchov, a Polish woman, Zofia Bania, was looking for them to help them. They knew Zofia. She was a farmer's wife from a village just outside Pinchov. Clip number 3, please.
byli u mnie, to się chciałam tak zobaczyć, porozmawiać z nimi. 40 years have gone by since I have seen the Rubineks. After so many years, I wanted to talk to them face to face, to talk over how we lived through everything, the hard times. In the war, I felt so much pity for them. It was impossible to betray them.
Lubiłam ją bardzo.
I especially liked Frania, Mrs. Rubinek, very much. I loved her as if she was my own sister, even though she was Jewish. Sometimes I didn't have money, and when I went to their store, Frania would give me a little food and other things on credit. We got to know each other, and she liked me very much. Once she asked me, when she was still in the store, if she and her husband could be hidden in my place. I wanted to think about it. I didn't know if I should take them in or not. My son Manek was only 6 years old. We hardly had enough to eat. I wanted to live through the war somehow. I took them in. They gave me money. We helped each other.
Even though I was very young, I was quite aware too. I felt I had an obligation, human duty. I felt that responsibility to the last moment. The Rubinek were with us. I was afraid of death the whole time. I could not tell our neighbors that we were hiding Jews. After the war, they were angry that we did not trust them. If one word slipped out, even one word, it could have been my death.
After some time, my husband wanted to throw them out, but I told him no. We couldn't. We have to keep them. It would be on my conscience for all of my life if they met their death because of us. When I told him all that, he hit me. He beat me a lot when we fought over this.
You know, my father was a hero. His life and mine and my mother were in danger for 2.5 years. We were all put in the situation and we had to leave it. This is the way the cards were dealt. So that's how it was.
The baby my mother was carrying, my sister, survived less than an hour in the harsh conditions of her birth at the Banya farm. For 2.5 years, from the time Maniak was 6 to almost 9 years old, he was like a child guardian of my parents' safety and survival. He loved them and he protected them. I met Sophia and Maniak for the first time 44 years later in the summer of 1986. Ludwig, Sophia's husband, had died a number of years earlier. Sophia was 83. Maniak was now 50. And that summer day, I saw my father run to Maniak and he threw his arms around him and he kissed him. It was like watching the embrace of father and son. There's a scene in the play where I confess to my parents, there's no book, that I lied about it so that I could have a reason to talk to them. First, they're shocked. Then my father, I have to hand it to him, is able to joke about it. I don't know what bothers me more, that you are with a non-Jewish woman or that Penguin is not publishing the book. But I don't let him off the hook. I say, why? Why? I'm so traumatized that I'm in love with someone who's not Jewish. What are you so afraid of? Me. Everything. The world can turn on you. It could happen here. What happened in Europe? Any people ripe for it. Just look what people did to each other over the last 3,000 years. I am not an Orthodox religious Jew, but if you will come to me right now with a gun and tell me that I should convert, if not, you'll kill me, I would give my life. You see what anti-Semitism did? Made us proud, made us strong, made us to keep our identity even in the face of inquisitions and pogroms and genocide. But as you see, you give to us a few decades of tolerance and peace. Maybe it's not such a big thing to marry the neighbor's daughter. Luckily, during all those interviews with my parents, the interviews took place over a period of 10 years. Luckily, there was actually tape in the cassette recorder. I decided to write that book, and it got published. By complete coincidence, the publisher turned out to be Penguin. As for me and my parents, when our daughter Hannah was born, and afterwards our son Sam, my parents looked at their grandchildren, and all the anxiety, let me be honest, most of the anxiety went away. This is from my play, but like the rest of the play, it's also from my life. When our daughter Hannah was born, Eleanor and I thought long and hard about when she should be told about the Holocaust, about my parents' survival, about the murder of all her Jewish relatives. I knew about the Holocaust way before I was ready to understand it. I don't remember a time when I didn't know about it. This is me, 6 years old, in the schoolyard. You have grandparents? Yeah, mine were murdered. I wanted to be special. I was a child. It wasn't until I had my first sleepover at a friend's house when I was 8 years old that I realized his parents didn't have nightmares and cry and scream in the night, and that my friend didn't have to go into their bedroom to see if they're okay. Maybe that was just my house. The teachers at Hannah's school suggested if we wanted to wait, it might be best when she's 13, 14. At that age, children are just beginning to relate events in history and the consequences to their own experiences. So when Hannah was 13, we told her about the documentary and the book. She didn't know the word genocide or Holocaust. Hannah didn't want us to tell her too much. She just wanted to read the book, and she did that night. And then she immediately read it again. That's my daughter. The next day, we watched the documentary with her. She said she wished she knew about it younger, when her grandparents were still alive. But she couldn't have talked to them about it. She was so young when they died. She was 5 when my father died, not yet 9 when my mother died. When Hannah was 9, the teachers in the school asked if, after we showed Hannah the documentary, when she's 13, would I consider showing the documentary to her whole class? You may think this is an odd thing to say. I wasn't sure it was a good idea. In those days, I was hesitant about Holocaust education. Teaching others, especially young people, about the genocide of the Jews, I was worried that could be exclusionary of tragedies and genocides that happened to other people, other cultures. When I came back from Poland to Toronto after doing the documentary, I remember playing poker with some of my actor friends. One of them was First Nations. He asked me about a trip to Poland. Yeah, to show you how tone deaf I was, I said, the Jewish cemeteries were destroyed. Gravestones were used to make sidewalks. I couldn't find where my ancestors were buried. My First Nations friend looked up at me and said, yeah, tell me about it. I'll never forget that moment as I connected to its history. I hadn't thought of it. What I think now is, if you believe that your people's story, if you believe that whatever tragedy happened to your people is more profound than what happened to any other people, then you might also believe that you have a right to drive an airplane into a building. Today, Holocaust education includes the term anti-racism, and it holds out its hand to other cultures, other nations, others' tragedies. Back then, I wasn't so sure about sharing our story with Hannah's class. And then my wife Eleanor said, what if it's an opportunity to inspire the class to investigate their own personal family's history? What if the school would commit to a personal history week? That did it. That made sense to me. But we were blindsided. When Hannah was 9, in 4th grade, she told us she heard her best friend Charlotte brag to other kids that her great-grandfather was Hitler's bodyguard. Hannah didn't know who Hitler was. I don't even think she knew what a bodyguard was. We forgot all about this story. We didn't take it seriously until later that same year. And this scene from the play, Hannah and Eleanor, Hannah's off with her friend Charlotte playing, and Eleanor and I are having coffee with Charlotte's mother, Lily. Lily was from Texas. Lily, me and Eleanor, Lily. My dad's parents are from Texas, so they did not want him to marry my mom, Eleanor. They didn't like her? No, I hadn't even met her. My dad was in the army, stationed in Germany. He fell for a local German girl, but they got married. They settled in Texas. Now his folks like her better than I like him. Yeah, my parents in Poland, they want her to go out with my dad because he was an actor, Eleanor. Saul's parents were not happy about me at first because I'm not Jewish. All right, but you charmed him, Eleanor. No, I had children. Oh, grandchildren cures everything. Yeah, I was raised by my grandfather. He's pulling me something fierce. Eleanor, in Texas? No, Nuremberg in Germany, till I was 10. In Germany, so you speak German. Ja, ich spreche fließend Deutsch. That means, no, I know it. I know what it means. Sprechen Sie Deutsch? No, Yiddish, I speak. It's basically German, Lily. It's German from around 1,000 years ago. Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, my mother's dad raised me. He was great. Eleanor, and your grandmother, his wife? No, I never knew her. Died young, before I was born. Eleanor, so why were you raised? My grandpa? No, my mom had to be in Texas with my dad, some green card citizenship kind of thing. I mean, I saw him, of course, my mom and dad, all the time, a couple times a year in summers. But mostly I was with my grandpa. And then when I was 10, I moved to Texas for good. I gotta say, I sure miss my grandpa. He passed 10 years ago now. How old was he? Oh, he was 82. He was born in 1912. He was in the war. He was drafted. Wehrmacht, regular German army. Yep. Your dad, he was in the war too. He wasn't in the army. Oh, too young. He was in Poland, born in Poland, Polish Jew, Holocaust survivor, him and my mom. Oh, I didn't know that. I'm sorry. No, listen, don't feel, no, I met a lot of people over the years whose parents or they themselves were in the regular German army, the Wehrmacht during the war. It's not it's not necessarily a big deal. Oh yeah, sometimes Grandpa would take out his old uniform, show me his captain's hat. He had a skull and crossbones like a flag on a pirate ship, Totenkopf, that's what he called it, means death's head. And he had a tattoo of his blood type under his arm, army macho, stuff. I looked at Eleanor and she looked at me and shook her head. No, don't get into this. But Lily, I don't think your grandfather was drafted. Oh, he said he was. You know what I'm talking about, right? No, I sure don't. Eleanor, maybe we should just talk about this another time. Lily, if his uniform had a Totenkopf insignia, skull and crossbones, and he was tattooed like that, he was in the SS. And if you're in the SS, you weren't there because you were drafted. Sorry, the S what? Eleanor, it's late. It's a school night. I think we should get Hannah home. Right. No, I'll go get her. After they left the room, I said to Eleanor, I said, total denial. Everybody's heard of the SS. I mean, what are we going to do? Nothing. It's none of our business. Well, of course it's our business, because now we know. I can't show the documentary to the class. To do what? Have them all participate in personal history week, inspire Charlotte to find out her great-grandfather was in the SS? Just relax. 4 years from now, Charlotte might not even be at the school. And unless her mother brings this subject up, we have to let it go. She'll either decide this is something she wants to deal with or she won't. We don't have to get involved. Not until Hannah is 13. Well, 4 years later, Charlotte was still in Hannah's class. If I was going to show them the documentary, I had to first talk to Charlotte's mother, to Lily. In this scene from the play, 4 years after the last scene, I'm with Charlotte's mother, Lily. Lily, a few years ago, Hannah told us she overheard Charlotte tell some other kids her great-grandfather was Hitler's bodyguard. Oh my God, Hitler's bodyguard? What does that even mean? Well, the SS was kind of symbolically that, right? SS stands for Schutzstaffel. Schutzstaffel? Doesn't that mean? Yep. Yeah, right. It means protection squadron. Charlotte, what said it? Like, how did she, like, bragging about it? Lily, she couldn't have known what she was saying. I think she just wanted to feel special. You know, she was a child. Now, Charlotte, she saw something. I guess you overheard something about your grandfather. Yeah, I've been getting, emails from fans of his for years. They want pictures, memorabilia, whatever I got. Fans of his? I know. Probably neo-Nazis and white supremacists and that kind of scum. I never answer them. Lily, all the parents in the class are going to get a copy of the documentary that I want to show the class, but I wanted to talk to you first. Why? I think I'll say no? No, I think I might say no. I'm not sure it's right to show it with Charlotte there. Why? Because my grandfather, she won't make the connection. We never talked about it. Right. You never talked about it. The thing is, after I show the documentary, the plan is for the class to take part in a personal history week. So if I show it and Charlotte is left out, right. So I don't think I can show it at all. No, that's not right either. You should show it and she should be there. But I got to talk to her first. Lily, do you know what your grandfather did during the war? No. I can't do it. I could never do it. I never looked him up. I could just never bring myself to it. I'm 42. Maybe it's time for me to open all the doors and windows in my life. What kind of wife I am, what kind of mother I am, what kind of woman I am. My whole life, I never asked any questions. Why my mother always fought, screaming fights with her father, my grandfather. Why my great uncle, my grandfather's only son, lives alone somewhere in Germany, no contact with any of the family, in and out of mental institutions all his life. Why my grandmother died of a heart attack right after the war in her 40s. I never asked why. What was his name, your grandfather? She tells me his name. I go to the computer. I look him up. There's good news, Lily, and there's bad news. Good news is he was never a wanted war criminal. Right? The bad news is he should have been. I'll talk to Charlotte. I'll tell her everything. I did show the documentary to the class that had in it two best friends, Hannah, granddaughter of a victim, and Charlotte, great granddaughter of a perpetrator. After the class watched the film, I asked them, how many of you think my family's story is more dramatic than your family's story? Every hand shot up. I said, no, I really don't think so. Your grandfather, your great aunt, somebody in your family knows how you got here, why you were born, where you were born, why your parents or grandparents or their grandparents came to live where they did. Because of war, famine, persecution, a better life. I believe that within 2 generations, you will find in your own family history, great romance, betrayal, murder, lives saved at the last minute, cowardice, miraculous coincidence, great heroism, as dramatic as any of the greatest novels ever written. Victims and perpetrators, heroes and bystanders, all in your own family history, if you ask the right people the right questions. Hannah's class did find out things about their own families, and they shared those stories with each other all week long. One 14-year-old girl in the class said this to me with a kind of naivety and startling wisdom that can only come from the innocent. If everybody told stories to each other like this, wouldn't genocide be impossible? There's a scene in the play, my father is stopped on the street after curfew by the Gestapo. Gestapo interrogates him, doesn't like my father's answers, beats him with the barrel of his gun. A crowd gathers like it's a sport. My father keeps getting beaten to the ground. Bleeding, he keeps getting up. He says nothing. He refuses to give the crowd the satisfaction of hearing him beg for his life. I say to my father, I don't think I would have been that brave. But I had nothing to lose. He would kill me anyway. So just luck that he didn't. No, I don't think I would have survived. What do you mean survived? The Holocaust. I don't think I would have lived. Never do you say that, not to me. Survive, not survive, be brave, be a coward, save other people, betray other people. You don't know what you are going to do until that minute when you are in it. Well, this is the minute, and we're in it. Do we know what we're going to do? Right now, 83 years to the day after Kristallnacht. Racism, fear, hatred, violence against immigrants, people of color, Jews, the LGBTQ community, anyone considered other, all on the rise, all over the world. This is the minute. And we're all in it. Thanks for being here and letting me share some of my play with you. I'm going to hand this over to Abigail now for any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rubinek. I know that as you were speaking, you probably were not seeing the messages flood in, but you've obviously moved so many people here tonight, and there's just been a flood of messages of thanks and of appreciation for what you've shared. We do have some questions, which I will get to, but I'm just going to run through a reminder of how to ask a question for those who may not have entered them yet. So we'll start with the questions that we have, but if you would like to ask a question, you just go to that Q&A function at the bottom of your screen in the black control strip, If your question is picked, you'll see a message on your screen that you've been reconnected as a panelist, and that allows you to turn both your camera and your microphone back on. And we'd ask you to do that so that you can ask your question to Mr. Rubinek directly and that he can see you. If you prefer to remain anonymous, just select the anonymous checkbox when you submit your question, and then I will ask your question directly. If you experience any technical difficulties, please let tech support know via the chat box, also located in the black control strip at the bottom of your screen. And I'm just going to go through the questions that we have. The first one is anonymous, so we'll start with that one. Mr. Rubinek, why do you think so many of the Hollywood and glitterati latched onto Israel to vilify when so many others in the world are being tortured and killed? And there are some examples, including the Uyghurs in Syria there. If you want to weigh in on that one to start.
I don't know how to answer for other people. I mean, the question is about why Hollywood people are centering on vilifying Israel?
Israel, yes. It was submitted in the earlier part of the evening before you had launched into your own presentation. So I think something on somebody's mind there.
Yeah, I understand. I'm not a representative of Hollywood. I represent only myself. You know, it brings up this thing of people want other people to represent them. When I was doing this years ago, when Penguin sent me out to publicize the book, and I would go to people wanted me to represent them. I would go to Second Generation, which is organizations that were called Second Generation Children of Survivors of the Holocaust, Jewish organizations, and they were kind of wanted me to represent. How could you tell a story about Polish people saving your parents' lives? Don't you know how many Poles were involved in collaborating and killing Jews? They really wanted me to represent other people, represent them, represent. I try not to make that mistake.
I appreciate that answer. The next question is from Carolyn Burns. So let's try that out and see if Ms. Burns is able to get her video and microphone on so that she can ask her question to you directly. We'll just give that a moment.
You know, they're not going to give you much time to do it before they move on.
Hi there.
Oh, there we go.
Hi, Mr. Rubinek. I'm just wondering, my question is, as a Jew and as an actor, what was it like for you to be part of the TV show Outer Limits Holocaust episode called Tribunal?
It's a really interesting question. This is a show, it was an anthology series, a sci-fi series that the showrunner was a wonderful man named Sam Egan, who I've recently been in touch with. In fact, he read a copy of early drafts of my play and gave me notes on it. When I first was offered this thing, it's over 22 years ago, I was concerned about a show that was, I didn't even read it yet. I knew that it was going to be time travel, and it was an hour-long sci-fi episode about a Nazi hunter who ends up going back in time, back to Auschwitz, and rescues his own sister. And I was very concerned. I remember I said, could somebody put me in touch with this writer? It turned out it was actually the showrunner, the boss of the series, Sam. I'd never met him before. I got on the phone with him and I said, Sam, I'm very flattered for the offer. I'm concerned that a sci-fi half-hour show about time travel in Auschwitz might trivialize the Holocaust. And he said, yeah, I know, right? Me too. I'm worried about exactly the same thing. You are? Oh, yeah. My father was in Auschwitz, he said, and I'm concerned about it. I showed him the script. He said, go for it. And I said, you know, I think I'm going to do this. He said, don't you want to read it? I said, oh, I want to read it, but I think I'm going to do it. The fact that he was also nervous about it gave me confidence that all we could do is try. I was very proud of that episode. It was more than the sum of its parts. It was a sci-fi episode, but it had a lot of heart. And had the blessing of his father, who was an Auschwitz survivor, who I met. And they rebuilt Auschwitz, parts of Auschwitz, and it was outside of Vancouver, and it was directed by a wonderful director, Mario Azzopardi. And I worked with Lindsay Krause. I worked with wonderful Jan Rubisch, the great Canadian actor, opera singer, was the bad guy, was the Nazi that I was hunting. I knew him really well. it was an extraordinary experience, and one of those things where I could have just turned it down because it sounds like it's going to trivialize, right? But Sam Egan was so great. He's still great guy. And he was so honest that I couldn't turn down. I was always grateful for his honesty, and I'm really proud of the fact that I did that show. Thanks for your question.
Great question, and I'm glad we had a chance for you to ask that directly. Thank you. Our next question is an anonymous one. It says, thank you, Mr. Rubinek, for this deeply moving story about your parents' love, devotion, and survival. Was Sofia recognized as righteous among nations?
Yes, she absolutely was, as was Ludwig, as was Maniak. Yeah.
And if I may tag onto that question with one of my own, it really stood out to me how you spoke about Maniak, and I'm wondering if you maintained a relationship with him after the documentary.
My parents did. They were the ones who were close. My parents had a relationship with them. My parents arrived in Canada in 1949 when I was 9 months old with $50 maybe. And $5 went to them, and they sent them money every year. And they had a relationship with them with letters and photographs.
Wow.
44 years before we got there, and my mother knew every name of every grandchild she had, of every relative that she had. She kept everything straight. My mother was a very well-organized woman.
That's beautiful. The next question comes from Chris Busby. I'll let Chris try and turn his camera on there and see if he can ask it to you directly.
Okay. They're only going to give you so much time, Chris, before they play the music and walk you off.
I think we're pretty generous here.
So he's having trouble.
Okay, well, it's a quick one, and I'm not sure if you wish to answer it, but Chris asks, what was the street address of your parents in Ottawa so I can smile every time I pass by?
We lived in different places in Ottawa. First, we lived in Sandy Hill, and then we moved to what was called Eastview, which is now Vanier City. And then eventually they bought their first house in Parkwood Hills, which is just north of the experimental farm, 23 Vanson Avenue.
Well, there are a lot of addresses, a lot of chances for people to smile. So thank you for answering that. Another anonymous question for you. An absolutely riveting, powerful, personal, and moving presentation. Thank you for your vulnerability and honesty. Where is the documentary available if we wanted to show it in our school?
Yes, that's a great question. It's the National Center for Jewish Film at Brandeis University is the distributor of the movie, of the DVD. And they'd be happy. I'm sure there's a price for schools. I'm happy they're a charitable organization, not for profit anyway. And they're really a worthwhile organization that preserves Yiddish films that were made all through Europe, and silent films too. And they are the distributors. National Center for Jewish Film out of Brandeis University.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to try something different here and let our team know that Felicia Alexander will get the next question with her camera on, if you can get her set up. And in the meantime, I'll just ask this anonymous question that might be a quick one while we get Felicia Alexander ready to ask. And that is, one of my favorite films is The Quarrel, but it doesn't seem to be available anywhere. Do you have any ideas?
The Quarrel is, I'm surprised that it's not available. There might be some kind of distribution issue. I can find out. I'm surprised. I thought that I think I got a copy of it recently.
Maybe it's a Canadian issue we have.
The Quarrel is a movie that was written in Yiddish by Chaim Grada, who was a close friend of my father's. And well, I didn't know, but he knew me when I was a baby in Montreal. Chaim Grada was a writer of the stature of Isaac Bashevis Singer, except he wrote less secularly. And he wrote in Yiddish. And the story was called Mein Krieg mit Herschel Resigner, which in Yiddish means, it's in Yiddish, and it means my quarrel with Herschel Resigner. My joke was I used to call it my dinner with Herschel. And I did it with the great Canadian actor, R.H. Thompson, who is an old friend of mine, who I was in touch with recently. And it's a really interesting movie just about these two people who are survivors, who both of them lost their family. And my character is running a yeshiva and is an ultra-Orthodox Hasidic Jew. We started out together in yeshiva when we were teenagers, but now in Montreal, we meet in 1948, and I've got my own school. And he's a writer and is a secular Jew. And we meet by accident. And the old quarrel that we had starts to arise. And I'm a Jew who believes that after a Holocaust, the only thing that Jews can do is to exclude the rest of the world and to build a wall around themselves. And he believes that the only thing after a Holocaust that Jews can do is to open the gates to the world. And this is Chaim Grada's way of talking about the postmodern Jewish struggle that happens within one individual by separating it into two characters. It's an extraordinary piece.
Oh, thank you for sharing. I'm now going to move to Felicia Alexander, who has a question. Let's see if we can get that video and microphone on.
I really appreciate people trying to do this. I love to answer questions when I can see the people, but
Makes such a difference.
Technology has its own challenges.
Well, I'm hoping this one will work out because there's a bit of I think a missing word in the question, and I'd really like to know what Felicia wanted to know from you. So I'll just give it a couple more seconds if
you want to ask me something in the
camera? Yeah, sure. So the next question is from an anonymous person, and just I'll come back to Felicia if that's going to work out. But in the meantime, very important question: where will your play be staged and when?
I have to finance my play, and I have a wonderful producer, Corey Ross, who is an old friend who's very experienced theater producer. He's right now responsible for the wonderful Van Gogh immersive exhibits that are all over North America. Corey and I are trying to figure out how to do it. It's an 8-person play with 16 characters. It takes place over 3 generations. It's not easy. So it's a work in progress. I was supposed to workshop it. I had just finished the first draft of it before COVID hit, so I was able to workshop it with different actors. Actually, I had Judd Hirsch in my living room playing my own father right before COVID hit. Judd is an old friend of mine. And I had a reading with my friends who are wonderfully critical, as you can imagine. But then all the workshops had to happen this way, on Zoom, one with just a couple of actors at a time. Workshops are a way that a play gets better and better. And so eventually, it'll have a director and it'll have a budget. I'm hoping Corey stays interested in it, and it doesn't end up being too expensive to produce. But one of my dreams is to do this in Poland. In fact, I'm going after my Polish citizenship, which in Poland is the way they do it is I haven't really lost my citizenship. I'm regaining it, reaffirming it, because my parents didn't lose it when they left. I would like to be a Polish citizen, putting this play on in Polish and in English in Warsaw and in Poland. That would be really important for me to do. Anyway, you can't live without dreams and hope, right?
Beautiful. And Felicia's question seems to have disappeared from the list, so I'm going to move on. And I'll try again to flag that I will go with an anonymous question for now, but that the next question will be Camerlyn Lawrence's question. So perhaps if Camerlyn Lawrence can be made a panelist so that that question can be asked on video. In the meantime, thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing yourself with us, Saul. What advice do you have for all young people, from the least to the greatest and from all identities? How should they learn, process, and then act in their lifetime regarding this critical topic of Holocaust?
Oh my God.
Question.
The first thing I'll tell you is the first play I wrote, you know what the title was? Terrible Advice. How would I advise? I was talking to a good friend of mine, said, I wouldn't say that, you think Holocaust education should wait that long. I think you're going to find a lot. That's a very unpopular point of view. I said, look, again, I don't represent anybody. This is what Eleanor and I thought long and hard about. It happens that my children, both Sam and Hannah, went to a Rudolf Steiner school. It's called Waldorf Education here in North America. We like the education system. And we like the teachers, and they're both lifers. They both started in preschool and went all the way through to grade 12 in the Rudolf Steiner system. And very often you have the same teacher from 1st grade to 8th grade, almost like another parent. And it's development from the inside out. It's called Anthroposophical Education, which means education of the soul. It's not a religious school, it's a spiritual school. And we wanted our children mostly to be kind And they are. I'm very, very fortunate that I have wonderfully kind children. And it was a decision that Eleanor and I made. To me, her background, her Scottish and Celtic and background is just as important. And the history there is just as important, certainly just as dramatic. We had to figure out what we thought was right. I was basing it a lot on what happened to me. And the fact that I didn't know a time when I didn't know it. And I didn't have to know it, but my parents were survivors. It was all the people that were coming to the house. It was the fact that they cried in their room at night. But that was not my kids' experience, and nor did I want to burden them with the deaths and genocide and the darkness of humanity so early. You're born in First Nations, you're African American, you're a person of color, you're depends on your sexual orientation. You may already be experiencing persecution or watch persecution in your family without being ready for it, and there's nothing anybody can do about it given your environment. And I have no advice for other people. All I do is I write a play about my family, what happened to us. It's mostly about parents and children, as you can tell. I'm not trying to educate anybody with my play. I'm not an educator. I am a storyteller, and I hesitate to advise others, which is why I wrote a play called Terrible Advice.
I see that Kemerlin already has her camera ready to go. So go ahead, just unmute. Perfect. There you go. You can ask your question directly.
Hello.
Hello. So I grew up with a World War II veteran as my great grandfather. And so my earliest memories are of his experiences with the 1st Infantry Division and everything that he carried with him from that. And so it's always been heavy into my personal identity, what it means to stand up for others and to be there in the moment when something is actively happening. But what would you say is the best advice for being an ally more than just in the moment, but just in everyday life?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Kemerlin. I'm, as I say, I'm so hesitant to advise others. But please, can you frame the question a little differently?
So when I see something happening, because I've had this upbringing that is very, if you're going to have regrets, make sure it's, not for the things you didn't do that you should have. I have no problem stepping up, and it's pretty straightforward. When you see something, if you're capable, you do something. But as far as the everyday things, be it education, be it how you present yourself, that sort of thing.
I think if we're talking about the same thing, if you're talking about what do you do in the face of persecution, what do you do in the face of intolerance, what do you do? Like my father says, I don't think you know what you're going to do until you're in it, till the second that you're in it. Because of who I am and because of my background, what I believe is I need to put myself in other shoes. That includes the people that we call monsters, or the people that we think are stupid or racist, ignorant. There was a guy, I think, on January 6th, who wore a t-shirt that said Camp Auschwitz on the front and staff on the back. And my attitude is, what is it like to be that person? Where are they coming from? Are we just labeling people? Are we going to label people monsters, horrible people? Are we ever going to be able to reach across and change anybody if we don't know their story, if we can't walk a mile in the shoes of people that we have contempt for? I don't know what we do. I know that when I say this is the minute that we're in it, I mean, and my father's saying, what am I afraid of? I'm afraid of everything. I'm afraid what happened in Europe can happen here. Any people ripe for it. Well, we've seen what happens when that kind of rhetoric, it's words, we were told, words, it all starts with those words, with demagoguery and words, twisted words. And we have to educate our children. We have to educate ourselves. We have to find a way to be empathetic with people that we don't agree with. I don't know. I have no advice for anyone.
Actually, I think that's the best advice.
Glad we were
Thank you.
able to get you on screen there. And next, I'm going to try to take a question from Faye Grunswig, if we can get you to turn your camera on and your microphone. Pretty good track record so far, I would say, of people being able to figure that out.
It's good.
Yeah.
But you want to, while they're figuring it out, you might want to ask me.
Sure. Okay. And a similar question to earlier, but from your most recent show, it's a question about how you reconcile being in Hunters, which distorts the Holocaust by inventing events which surpassed reality. The questioner says the show thereby potentially aiding and abetting Holocaust denial.
Oh dear God!
It's a big one.
It's not that big. Let me tell you what I think about this. Years ago, there was a major event. I remember in the early 90s, and in Canadian history, it had to do with a massive scandal, gold scandal, mining scandal. It had to do with, and there were 4 nonfiction books written about it. 4. And I remember, I wish I could remember the name of the Globe and Mail reviewer. He was brilliant, but maybe it was he or she, I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was. But what I never forget was I remember reading all the reviews of all 4 books that were being reviewed. And this reviewer liked them all and had good things to say about each of these nonfiction books. And then said, one day, somebody will write a novel and get at the truth. And I never forgot that. You know, I don't want to spend a long time talking about defending some things are fictionalized. Characters are fictionalized. It's very easy to attack anything that you may not like. Something is either effective, it moves you, makes you laugh, makes you think, or it doesn't. There's inventions in everything. Documentary films are subjective. The way they're put together, what was chosen to be shot, what was chosen not to be shot, what was omitted. There is no such thing as objective fact that way when we are presenting things like films or books. And so to talk, when people say, well, you know, this was invented, this kind of thing didn't happen at Auschwitz. Well, and so you're fueling all the lies and people talking about this stuff, you know. I think it's a legitimate question, but I think that everything I'm involved in my life is to try to get at the truth through fiction. And so it starts to become a moot question for me that becomes irrelevant for me.
May I follow up on that, since there's been 2 questions of this nature? When you're looking at a role, how much does your personal history play a role in your decision making there?
We spend our lives trying not to make unconscious decisions, don't we? Our lives are maybe spent from going from here to some level of consciousness so that we don't react, so that we can respond rather than react. And as we get older, and probably not wiser, but if we try to be wiser, if we have the right friends and the right partners and the right, if they have the right will to be a better person, I guess, then you try not to react. So you're going to respond, and you're going to respond based on your understanding of who you are and what you think is important. Before you do that, you would just react. You'd react to the way you would anything. Should I get this job? Should I go to that school? Should I go on that date? Any important decision in your life for an actor, it's should I audition for the role? Never mind, take the role. Should I audition for it? And then if they want me, do I want them? Well, of course, who you are and how you grew up and everything about you is going to determine what it is. There's no role written, whether it's by Shakespeare or Tolstoy, no character written that's as deep as a human being. And the better the character written, the better the character is written, the more you have to fill. It's almost like this. It's almost like this in a role. When people ask me, I'm a guitar player, for example, an amateur guitar player. And people say, I'm going to buy a guitar. What do you think I should get? And I say, get the most expensive guitar that you can afford. Really? Yep. And here's why. You want to have an instrument whose potential is always greater than your ability to fill it. And it'll always attract you for that reason. Great roles, great stories, great collaborators, great artists working on something. The potential is so, for you to fill it with your life is there. The lesser the thing is, the harder it is to do. And so, of course, who you are, how you grew up affects everything. And you try not to just respond too quickly, you try to react too quickly, you try to respond with some understanding of what it's going to mean, some understanding of why you're choosing it.
That's a very interesting analogy. Thank you for your patience with that question. And to Faye Grunswig for her patience, because I see that she's got her video turned on and I think she's ready to go. Go ahead with your question.
Good job, Abigail, on my last name.
Oh, okay. Good.
Mr. Rubinek, thank you for taking my question. I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going to paraphrase. My parents met in Farnball as well, and came to Canada in Montreal and, you know, had me and my sisters. But when you were sitting in that kitchen table with Charlotte's mother as the two little children, who are my kids' age, by the way, were playing on the side, and this American who's supposed to be educated in America had no clue even what the Holocaust was. How did you, other than your wonderful wife who tried to subdue the situation, how did you refrain yourself from not reaching across the table and shaking her? Because I applaud your wife for you know, her sensibility, but how did you compose yourself and even think beyond that, and for Charlotte's feelings, and how do you, you know, worry about everybody's skeleton in the closet rather than your own experience?
I hope I made it clear that Lily was an extraordinary woman and that she was very brave. I think that she was in denial. I think she knew what the SS was. I think she knew what the Holocaust, she'd seen movies, and she was ignorant about a few things that she was willfully ignorant about, as she explained. I tried to portray her honestly. I think she was very brave. And the reason that I included this part of my play is because I wanted to show somebody who had a transforming moment. I think I recognized, I was upset. I said to Eleanor, you know, what the hell are we going to do? I mean, she's in denial. But it was clear that there was something else going on. It wasn't somebody who was ignorant. It was somebody who was traumatized by her own background to a certain extent and had blinders on. But that you don't need to be German for that. I've seen it in as many Jewish people as non-Jewish people. What I believe, Faye, the bystander, the hero, the perpetrator, the victim, that's very often in the same person and sometimes on the same day.
Thank you.
I will queue up that we will have Kay Keenan ask the next question via video, if that's able to happen. And in the meantime, an anonymous question is, how did you feel when you watched the original footage of your parents for the first time?
Oh, but I was there. Film? You mean in the documentary? Is that what they mean? I was there.
I'm not sure because it was anonymous. Yes, I mean, perhaps it was once it all came together. I would interpret it that way. How did you feel when you saw them?
Part of putting it together. I mean, a wonderful man named Reed Dennison, who's since become a very well-known editor in Canada. This was his first film as an editor. This was my first film as a producer. Michael Kozitzky, an old friend of mine, wrote the beautiful score for it. Somebody I'd grown up with. We were all first timers in many ways. And so I was watching the footage. There's a lot of footage that we couldn't include. The film is only an hour long. It was made for a wonderful series called Man Alive with Ray Bonesteel. Ray Bonesteel in those days at CBC Television. They had only a half-hour version, but I did a co-production with them, which meant that they got to show their version for their show, and then I got to make my own cut of it, which was only 20 minutes longer, really. This is about a 52-minute documentary. It's not a long documentary. But where it really affected me was when it premiered for an audience, big audience, was at the Toronto International Film Festival in 1987, with my parents there. And the whole audience knew they were there, and they all turned. We were kind of sitting in the middle of 800 people or something, and everybody kind of turned in a circle to my parents and stood up and applauded their survival and who they were. And if you watch the film, you'll see they're funny, you know, they're very much in love, and they were in love all their lives. I was a very fortunate kid. But to watch that meant a lot to me. For them, meant a lot to me. They wouldn't have gone back to Poland if there wasn't a documentary. This was a wonderful Vic Sarin, who was the cinematographer, who's a well-known Canadian director now, and Kathy Smalley, who was an extraordinary producer, who both have the directing credit on this thing for good reason, because it couldn't have been made without them. And Vic I'd known for years. He had been the cinematographer in my earliest dramas at CBC, and it was Vic, who's originally from Kashmir, and is Vic who talked my parents into it. Vic came to Ottawa with me. My parents didn't want to go back to Poland. Everybody's did. They didn't. I mean, they'd supported the Spania family for years, and they were fine to send pictures, but to go back there and remind themselves of everything. But it was Vic who said, "Well, we're going to make a documentary film. You're going to get to tell your story." And then they knew that there would be a perimeter, you know, that there would be a fence, a little bit of fence, that was a reason to do it. Just going there without the documentary, they were kind of open to the winds of horror and memory. With the documentary crew, 3 people, you know, 4 of us. But that little crew gave them a feeling of protection and allowed them to go. And so it was always a new experience, going there to begin with, filming it, watching my mother and father tell the stories, on putting it together, trying to tell the story right, watching an audience of them, and how my parents then had this film that they were able to show to friends and people. It was a very important thing. And who knew? I didn't know I was going to have children. I didn't know that this would matter. I had no idea how. I didn't know that this would happen, that I was eventually going to. I thought I was done with this subject. I have a very good friend, Rick Cleveland. He's a wonderful playwright and great television writer, won an Emmy for West Wing and worked on many, many shows. And he's the one who said, "You're not done with this subject," about 4 years ago. Rick did. And I said, "Please tell me I'm done with this subject. I wrote a book. I made a documentary film. I mean, am I not done with this? No, but look what happened with your daughter and her friend. There's all kinds of stories you haven't talked about, you and your relationship to your parents, the lies that you told that turned into the truth. You're not done with it. There's a play here." And he inspired me to do it. So it's always it's a renewed situation of storytelling. And as I get older, there's different parts of the story that seem to matter to me. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity, my God, to be able to share excerpts from it is, wow, it's a big deal for me.
Well, it's a big deal for us to have you as well. And unfortunately, we're almost out of time, but Kay Keenan has been patiently waiting there for her question. So I'll let you get that last question in and thank you. And I just know that there were lots of other questions in the wings, which means that there were so many people just so moved by your presentation. Go ahead, Kay.
Thank you. Hi, Mr. Rubinek. I hope this is worth the last few minutes of the time here. My question, I have to rephrase it a little bit because I was typing and listening and it didn't make much sense really, but there's a lot of reluctance among people who've been through major events and tragedies, and especially the people from the World War generation, the Holocaust. My experience is from the outside. My mother was an Army nurse and was in the 95th Evacuation Unit and was one of the medical personnel who was selected to go into Dachau to liberate the camp when it was liberated by the Allies. There's a huge reluctance among that group of people to talk about anything. I was raised knowing that the Holocaust occurred, and that was about as far as the conversation went. So the question is, other than lying about writing a book, how do you get people to open up and start and continue a conversation about this? Because the memories are leaving us, they're dying, and we're losing the firsthand history.
You know what I think? I think that, first of all, I was very fortunate. My parents, I know that it was hard for people to talk to their parents or their grandparents if they were in a concentration camp. Who knows what they had to do to survive? Who knows those memories? But you got to remember, my parents always said they were lucky. I think I said it in this presentation. They thought they were lucky. They had each other. They were together from the time they were 16 years old, and they survived together. And they were in love, and they had each other. And they were hidden. They weren't in a concentration camp. They lost everybody. Everybody was, but they had each other. They found it easier to talk. My father was also an actor. He was a storyteller. I was lucky that those stories were shared. But all through my life, I've been interested in other people's stories about this. Very first time I was on radio with Andy Barry at CBC, and he said, "Can we just get Holocaust survivors to call in, or children?" I said, "Please, here's the segment of the population I would like to call in." This is 35 years ago when I was publicizing the book and documentary. He said, "What segment?" I said, "Only one segment I'm interested in. Only children of parents." And the thing is that if you're going after the trauma, you're already hitting a wall.
Yeah.
What I think is, ask, why did I end up in this city? There's a grandmother somewhere, a great aunt, an uncle. Ask questions about just ordinary questions. They will lead you to a Tolstoy novel. They will lead you there. You don't have to ask about, tell me about the time you were traumatized in Dachau. That's gonna stop things cold. The thing that you do, I believe, and with this thing I discovered with 13 and 14-year-olds, and again in Sam's class, my son Sam's, when he was in 12th grade, what the children did, whether they wrote a song about or did a little iPhone video about it or whatever they did. You ask ordinary questions. Why are you in this city? Oh, my parents moved here. My dad moved here because of a job. What? Why? What job? If you ask questions and you delve into the reasons that people are where they are, I guarantee you will find every element that exists in the greatest novels ever written. Everything I said, romance, murder, perpetrators, victims, bystanders, heroes, all of those things, you got to start small. And you got to ask more than one person in your family. People who knows them, you investigate. And if you start with the big stuff, it's really unlikely people are going to open up. I said I wouldn't give advice, but there's some advice.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kay, and thank you so much, Mr. Rubinek, for everything that you've shared this evening. I'm going to turn it over to someone else to thank you in a more fulsome manner and to offer some closing remarks, who's a friend of yours. I'm very pleased to introduce Bernie Farber, chair of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, to provide those comments. Acknowledged as one of Canada's most accomplished NGO CEOs, Bernie Farber's career spans more than a quarter century, focused on human rights, anti-racism, pluralism, and inter-ethnic faith-race relations. His efforts have been documented in numerous Canadian human rights publications, books, newspapers, and magazines. His work has also been cited in a number of academic publications. Mr. Farber has successfully run large NGOs and foundations, including Canadian Jewish Congress, the Paloma Foundation, and he's recently retired as executive director of the Mosaic Institute. Today, Mr. Farber is a human rights consultant, newspaper columnist, and social justice advocate. He's received numerous awards for his civil rights work, including the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal, Government of Canada 125th Commemorative Medal, and the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police Award for outstanding service and dedication to policing in the province of Ontario, among others. Welcome, Bernie Farber.
Thank you so much, Abigail and Saul. Thank you so much. You hit so many chords. People don't know this, but Saul and I basically grew up together. When he said he lived in Sandy Hill, he kind of lived just down the block from us. And he was very much my big brother. As a matter of fact, so much so that he shared his Superman comics with me. They were in mint condition, and had I kept them today, who knows where we would be. But his experiences, and Franja and Srulik and Israel's experiences, mirror the same experiences that my father had. And I suppose what I really want to say in the end is that despite the horror and despite the tragedy that we heard tonight, this was really a story of love. It was a story of love and how love impacted on survival. And we learned something today. And I want to just end this evening by telling you a story that a dear friend of mine, I hope he's in the audience today, a fellow colleague, Eric Vernon, who worked with me at Canadian Jewish Congress, reminded me of many years ago. He told me about a remarkable novel called The History of Love. Its author was Nicole Krauss, and it tells the story of a boy and a girl in a small village in Poland growing up in the pre-war period and coming of age after the Nazi invasion. And the boy, now a man, and the narrator of the novel recalls that for her 16th birthday, he gave her an English dictionary, and together they learned the words. And later, when things happened that they could never have imagined, she wrote him a letter that said, "When will you learn that there isn't a word for everything?" And it's true, as it's been said, that there have been things in Jewish history that is too horrible to be believed, but not too horrible to have happened. And nothing epitomizes this more than the Shoah, than the Holocaust. So the Holocaust itself represents a watershed in human history, a period of horror that redefined the limits of depravity of human nature and expanded humanity's consciousness of evil. The Holocaust has become the seminal point of departure for understanding the general potential of humankind and for such inhumanity. Though not the first genocide in human history, and sadly also not the last, the Shoah serves as a definition of the utter negation of human rights. It was a slaughter that was organized on bureaucratic principles and executed on an industrial scale. It was undertaken with contemptuous disregard for the humanity of its victims, let alone for any inherent rights to which they might be entitled simply by virtue of their humanity. In the end, the Nazis murdered the vast majority of Jews that were under their control during the Second World War, including 1.5 million children, as part of the horrific scheme to eradicate the Jewish genetic pool. And it is true that the Nazi war machine was responsible for millions of other civilian casualties, including the mass murder of political opponents, the Sinti and Romani people, gays and lesbians, and persons with mental disabilities. And we mourn these senseless deaths and honor their memory tonight as well. But it was only the Jews who were intended for total destruction. In the words of Nobel Peace Laureate Elie Wiesel, not all victims were Jews, but all Jews were victims. So within our history and without our history, we have no perspective from which to change. However, sadly, even with our history, change has been a hard-fought and little one. We continue to have much work to do. And this evening, and thank you so much, Minna, for bringing us all together, and Professor Kotler for your words as well. But as a child of a Holocaust survivor, I recognize that there still remains evil in this world. And we have to strive to work towards eradicating that evil. And we do so, as Saul so eloquently noted, in two ways. One, through education, and one, through storytelling. And so tonight, you have heard some wonderful stories. But these are stories that for us Ottawans and those of us in the audience that are children of survivors who knew Saul and Franja and Srulik, Israel, and hearing Saul recreate his own father's voice and seeing Franja and Srulik on film once more became alive for us again. And I'm left with this memory of the Rubineks in our house, sitting around our living room, telling these stories that Saul has so eloquently put together. And they did this every time they got together. They told stories. And sometimes it was the same stories, but it didn't matter because people like Saul Rubinek and others, myself, Professor Kotler, we've taken these stories and we mold them into a form in which we can continue to tell them so that people can learn. So I thank you tonight for telling us your story, Saul. And I hope that in the end, when this all in the telling comes together, that you can say, those of you here tonight can say, I heard the first rains of this in a place in Ottawa. I was sitting in my living room, or I was sitting in my dining room, and I was watching it virtually. And here it is right now together, and you can all be a part of it. So thank you all very much. Abigail, thank you for your wonderful moderation, and from strength to strength, my friends.
Thank you. I know we're just about at time. If you could just bear with me for a couple of housekeeping comments to close the evening before we say goodnight. I know so many of you would have preferred this event to be in person. And for those who wish to meet Mr. Rubinek, Chess is planning to host a meet and greet with him in the spring. So stay tuned. We'll have some more information on that in the future. A reminder, we have some more events this month. And if you haven't already registered for Helen Epstein's keynote presentation on November 14th, you can still do so. There'll be information available in the chat here and on our website. Helen Epstein is a well-known author and child of survivors, and her keynote is called The Shadow of the Holocaust on the Lives of Descendants of Survivors. Is it possible to move beyond its grip? And you can see that we also would like to give another thanks to our sponsors and partners who are up on your screen tonight. And finally, if you missed or you know somebody who missed some portion of tonight, you can always come back to Chess's website. Tonight's event will be posted there too, as well as other events for Holocaust Education Month. You can find information about that already. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us this evening. Have a great rest of your night.